Good morning. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Mesa City Council study session for the morning of May the 2nd. All of our council are present. First item on our agenda is to review our agenda for our Monday, May 6th meeting. So council, please take a look at that document. Mr. Brady, are there any staff presentations? I'm not aware of any on this. Council questions, Mr. Summers.
I would like to a staff briefing on 6B, which is the Gallery Park Freeway Landmark Monument sign. This is the first time I've seen it, and it basically looks like a billboard, and there is some substantial departures from the city guidelines on this. So, and there's a presentation in here.
I'm not sure if it's.
There is. Staff was unaware that I was pulling this up, so if you want to move on to something else, somebody has any other questions?
All right, yeah, if there's a, does staff need a minute to get it the right AV equipment queued up?
Rachel, you can see it on here. It may not show up there.
Okay.
You need, I've got it, it's attached to the
agenda item.
Okay. Well, I can speak to it. So it's a freeway landmark sign for the Gallery Park development. That the sign itself is 75 feet tall. It contains an electronic message display on the sign face itself, but it is distinguished from a billboard in that they would not be able to display any off-site advertisement. So it's just advertisement for the properties that are within the Gallery Park development itself.
So it's not, yeah, it's not the same thing we've been talking about in the past as far as being a billboard. It can't advertise, Rachel, anything other than the businesses that are on that site.
That is correct. Yeah,
Was this part of the original, when we did this zoning, was this anticipated, was this part of it?
It was anticipated that this would come forward at a further time. They originally had brought forth 2 billboard freeway landmark signs, and they've reduced it just to the one landmark sign on the property.
So we've had this conversation with council previously when we were talking about the development of this entire area.
So this was part of the development agreement and they could have 2, and now it's down to 1?
Not part of the development agreement did we state that they could have 2. Just when they originally came forward with the proposal for their freeway landmark signs, they originally had proposed 2 of them, and we had discussed with them and negotiated it down to a one billboard, or one, I keep saying billboard, one freeway landmark sign.
Okay. So that's the billboard right there with a giant television screen. Is there anything in there, because I know when we discussed the billboard one, there were stipulations to how bright it could be at certain times of day and night. Is that also included in this, that it has to dim at night?
Council member, yes. So within our electronic message display, we have certain parameters for the lighting of those displays themselves. So yes, it does have certain parameters to the brightness that display screen can be and the dimming of that screen at nighttime.
Okay, and then slide. Could you show the slides where the site, the overview of the site, maybe slide. Lord, getting blind. Starting with slide 5. So where would it go on this site?
So on slide 5, it's going to be right up north, right in this area, and I'm going to switch down a couple of slides because it shows here where this is exactly where that freeway landmark sign will be located. So you can see it's about 176 feet from the property line itself, but to the freeway, it's 334 feet. So it's set back a significant amount. They did do what we call a balloon test. So we have them do perspectives from various spots along the freeway to show what the height would be, and just to prove that that's the height that would be needed to have road visibility for the sign itself.
Is that the simulation on page 9?
That would be, well, that's a rendering of it. So it's similar to that, yes. So that is a rendering of what the sign will look like.
Okay. And then what looks like what's around it? So light industrial east, to the north is a tire shop, right? That's industrial also, commercial across the street. I assume it wasn't too visible from Gilbert residential?
No, it was not.
It was under, they wouldn't be blinded by the light. So the only residential in this area is going to be the apartments that are built as part of this project, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and they're not built yet, so they will see the sign before they come in for rentals?
They will.
All right. The only concern I guess I don't have a problem with this necessarily, particularly since it was, as the city manager said, part of the agreement. They're down to one sign, they've done their studies. I'm a little disturbed that nobody came to me to tell me that this was coming. And I don't know if that's staff or maybe Pew and Lake should have given me a heads up that this was coming. As I saw this and I went, this looks like a billboard. The issue I have isn't necessarily with this site, and every site needs to be different, but there are other commercial sites that we have to consider that are far closer, where residential is maybe across the freeway, and that this would cause some issue with. So I guess I don't necessarily have a big concern about it, other than I got blindsided
Okay,
a little bit.
understood.
I just have a question about the modifications. So the FLM guidelines and it seems like there are pretty significant modifications. Is this typical for, do we have other signs like this? I can't think of
We
in
do-
Mesa
we do have other-
that deviate this much. And I guess what I'm getting at is, do we need to update our guidelines? I mean, if we're deviating this much, is it really a guideline?
Yeah, Mayor, council member, go forth. I can't recall the last time that we did a freeway landmark sign. It has been a while, but we do have several within the city. So Dana Park would be an example of one. The Fiesta Mall site has a freeway landmark sign, so does the Superstition Springs
Riverview,
site.
we did two at Riverview.
Riverview as well.
Do they have electronic displays?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't
Almost
speak
everything does
to,
those.
I can't speak to the history of if they required any deviations to those signs as well. But we could take a look at our freeway landmark signs in relation to those and see if they did require deviations and if any updates were needed.
Does this seem significant to you or not as far as the modifications go?
They don't seem too extreme to me, just based on, because they are including the message display on the board, and that's what a few of these have to do with, is because of that electronic message display.
I think that distance separation too is a challenge, because the other sign that's being compared to is in another jurisdiction with a competing, commercial development in Gilbert. So we're over this side, and I'm sure what happens is everybody wants to have the same kind of visibility. And I think the challenge here too on the height issue is that part of the 202 is elevated as it goes over Power Road. So I'm sure there's some height they need to get above to make that visible. So I think
That makes sense.
I think that's kind of what we're working with here.
The display interval,
Yeah.
maybe that part needs to be updated, because that's, that's obviously,
Yes.
doesn't apply anymore.
Right.
To
Yes.
an electric display, so.
Yeah, one
just-
period for one, that's a good point. I think that's a fair way we can look at it.
Yeah, I mean, from a design aesthetic perspective, I think it's fine. I don't want these, the issue I'm having is, and I understand the elevation challenges. As we go forward, I think we're gonna see some more commercial development. There's probably gonna be more demand for this. So maybe looking at it as changing the standards is a good way to go. My concern down the road is how these tie in as they get closer to residential. I don't think anybody's gonna complain about this one, given that there is no residential nearby. But in the future, that's gonna be a concern. And then it'd be great to just know that these are coming, because we've had controversies before on digital displays, so just like a heads up.
Thanks, Ray.
Other than that, it can stay on consent.
Okay, thank you. Council, other questions regarding Monday's agenda? Julie?
On 7, I just lost it. 7C, this is a development in my district, Saucepan and Maine. It's just up for introduction, so I'm not asking to pull it off of consent at this point, but I wanted to bring it up just because I am concerned about parking, and I just wanted to bring to attention, this is the particular kind of product that has private parking is what I'm calling it, that is either a garage or carport. So this one's carport parking. But all of our multifamily housing goes by the 2.1 parking standard. And I think we need to look at these kinds of products that have the private parking. So each unit has 2 of their own spaces. And so then when you look at the available guest parking spaces, even though they match this, they meet the standard or exceed it, it still worries me that we're not going to have enough parking, and I don't want to do anything that's going to affect the surrounding neighborhoods, as we're seeing across the city, which happens when these kind of developments aren't parked sufficiently. I was just talking to someone 2 days ago that was working on a project. They had to actually, people weren't renting it because there wasn't enough parking. So they actually had to take 2 buildings down to be able to have more parking so that people would rent. So I want these projects to come in and to be successful, and we need more housing, but I also don't want to do anything that's going to negatively impact the neighborhoods. And I think we really need to take a look at these parking ratios just on this particular type of product, the ones that have the private parking. Because then if you have for example, I mean, there's a presentation on here, I don't know that we need to pull it up, but slide 7, if you guys look at the presentation, has listed that it's 37 carport spaces. It's actually 74 would be private. Does that make sense? Because there's a driveway. So this particular development has a carport with a driveway, so they're tandem parked. And so out of the 83 spaces proposed, I'm getting into the weeds here, but 74 of those spaces are private that wouldn't be able to be used by anyone else. So I just think we need to look at this. I've talked to staff, I've talked to the developer, everyone is aware of this, so we're just gonna continue having this conversation to see what that magic number is that we can do for guest parking. But I don't know if any of you have had this come up in your districts, but I just think we can't hold these specific types of developments to that 2.1 parking standard is what I'm saying.
And Councilmember, also, you pointed out, the problem I have is having a pickleball court in the middle of a,
Yes.
next to
Right
where
next
people
to
live and
people.
sleep, and we got to work on that too.
Yeah.
Well, they do that in single-family developments as well. I've had a couple, so I don't know how we're gonna,
I know.
you know,
I just don't think we should endorse something like that, because it ends up after the developer builds it, and then people move in, and the pickleball players show up at 7 a.m.
6
We
a.m.
get the calls, and,
yeah.
I mean, just having pickleball right next to where people live. I mean, this one is literally on the other side of
Yeah,
the wall. It
not
just
even
doesn't
with the
make sense.
carport
It's
to
a
block
private-
the sound.
It's a private pickleball court though, right?
Yeah,
For the
but you think that's
development.
gonna stop people from calling Coke?
No, but they're calling Julie, so I. Doesn't bother me.
Then she calls me, so.
But it's interesting you
Well,
bring that
fair.
up, because I've brought that up with proposals for single-family homes as well.
Yeah, I think
and-
I just think because we get those calls, I think we need to
Yeah,
we need
no,
to
I-
get some more spacing.
And I think, Julie, that what you're proposing, you have to reduce the number of units, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
I mean, or
Yeah.
figure out where to throw in some more parking, right? Because I don't want them parked
Yeah.
on the streets around there, and which is what will happen. So, and I actually love this type of a product. If I was gonna rent somewhere, I would love to have my own carport or garage. Like, it's a great product, and I love to see that they're coming up all over the city. I think it's a great product. I just think as council members, we need to really look at, and staff, which I have talked to at length about, I just don't think we need to do something different than that 2.1 parking standard for this particular type of product.
Well, what's interesting is you have a ginormous parking lot at that commercial center just
Right.
to the south.
Right.
It's too bad that that can't be sort of shared, because it is way underutilized.
Which it's way underutilized, and so we've actually talked about that, doing like a development agreement where they would give us
Yeah.
10 spaces or 20 spaces or something, but we're also talking about revitalizing all of these underutilized shopping centers in the city. So I want to look at 10 years from now and not just what to do for the next year. And if in 5 or 10 years that was, that shopping center came to life again, those spaces wouldn't be there. So like, we're just trying to kind of weigh all that out. So we're having conversations about it. I wanted to bring it up with all of you so that we can all be aware of this issue. I've been talking to traffic engineers and architects and developers and looking at things across the city and the country and trying to, I'm putting a lot of effort into trying to figure out what that magic number is, because I think that's the hard part, is all of these developments have different aspects. This is so far east, so it's not near transit, so obviously there could be a parking reduction if it was near transit, but this particular one and some other ones that are coming up, that doesn't come into play, so.
Just to reiterate, I support you on that concern. I have a constituent email I'm going to deal with this afternoon that has in Eastmark that deals with parking on the side of the road, and it's restricting traffic flow. So we have to deal with that, and I think about looking at this, not only would that restrict traffic flow in and out of here, it's going to restrict public safety. If you have to get a fire truck in here, that's going to be very difficult, so if it's under parked. So I guess the question is, do we even want to introduce this item if there are still outstanding issues that need to be resolved? I'd suggest we not even introduce
I
it.
will say, to be fair to the developers, because this current site plan is not the latest one, so there's 3 spots that have been added on the west side. I
That's
don't know
correct.
if you can show with the mouse, Rachel.
I
They have
can't.
added 3 more parking spaces.
Yeah.
The current 6 that are on this one of them is ADA.
Where is it?
So I don't think we should count the ADA one in our numbers either, because that's not really open to everyone, so, they added 3, right?
Right where this end cap
Where the
here.
cursor
So right
is
as
over
it
there.
curves.
So then we're at 8 or 9 with the ADA. So, I mean, again, trying to figure out what the magic number is difficult, but
And I will say, council members, that the applicant is aware and they're looking at ways that they
Yes.
might be able to add some additional spots on the site plan right now. And they're also looking at possibly if there's ways to reconfigure the amenities in the area as far as where the pickleball court and the dog park are located.
I mean, I'm comfortable leaving it on consent and seeing where we can get in the next 2 weeks, but
Question about the parking spaces.
yes,
of
it
the-
depends on how big of changes there are, whether they would, yeah.
Okay, Counselor, we're just saying, let's
Yeah,
talk.
depends
And then
on-
maybe Monday, we'll make a decision whether it's in the best interest to move forward with the introduction or just delay and start to do the introduction again.
Depends on how big of changes they
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
If they're bigger,
Yeah,
they would
that's
have to
what
come
was my
back. Yeah.
concern. Cool.
What were you saying?
Well, just a different wrinkle on the parking question. How many of these spaces are wired for electric vehicles? 0 or?
I don't believe that any of them are dedicated for electric vehicles.
I don't think so.
Yeah. We don't require it, yeah, but which I think is a problem, because if the industry makes good on its promise to switch to electric vehicles, in a few years, this parking lot's gonna be a stinking mess, right, with people, I don't know, like extension cords, right? Is that how you're gonna charge your car? I don't think so. Well, particularly the carports, I would think. I mean, guess if someone's coming over for Thanksgiving, maybe they don't need to be plugged in. But if that's where I park my car every night and overnight charging, yeah, for how I get to work tomorrow morning, it'd be good to have an outlet there. So we do need, there are some, Glendale, I think, and others are starting to require electric vehicle. Yeah, we need to address that, particularly as these vehicles become more affordable, multifamily. Folks are going to be precluded from buying them if they don't have a way to charge.
Since we're having this conversation, I just wanted to bring up one more thing really quick, because it helped me to think through this a little bit. So the type of product that has the garage with 2 spots and doesn't have a driveway typically, you wouldn't have like your bug guy or plumber park in there, whereas a carport, you could have like a plumber come park in your driveway behind your car in the carport. So the carport model is even different than the garage model. So that's just another element to like think through, that maybe there's a little bit more room for less parking with the carport model than the garage model. But again, trying to figure out what those formulas are is a little difficult, but anyways, thought I'd throw that out there too.
Rachel, are we exploring making changes to the code to require electric vehicle charging?
Mayor, I'll say in general that parking is one of the things that we are looking at in the future as far as our work plan items. It's not on this year's work plan, but in the near future, looking at our parking requirements and looking at the provision of electric facilities would be included within that.
I don't know, it can wait another year, frankly. I think we might need to elevate it to the top of the list of things to talk about. But obviously, that's not fair to, I mean, we'll consider the merits of this case going forward, but on a related topic, I think we might need to elevate that issue because all these big multifamily units that we're building, I think might become really problematic if we don't have access to charging ports. All right, thank you. Other questions on this item? Council, other questions for Monday's agenda? Ms. Duff?
Since we are on development, we might as well just keep Rachel here. Yeah, I know. And I feel bad, I haven't had a chance to discuss this with staff, and I have a lot of questions, so if we need to defer, that's fine. On item 6A, this is, I think, a Haas Crossing project, is that correct? The Craftsman on Elliott? I remember when they presented on the zoning case on that, I was quite excited for this mixed-use development, and now I'm quite disappointed. A CUP and a SUP are required. I'd like, to understand that a little bit more. Was it on the consent agenda for planning and zoning, or I just missed it?
It was on the consent agenda.
Okay,
for
that's why I
planning and
did
zoning.
miss the discussion. Okay.
So they did request a special use permit for a parking reduction, which was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. And then the council use permit is for a large commercial development, which is under the consideration of council.
Okay. I love mixed-use developments. This, I think, is lacking on the way it's laid out and doesn't really provide that sense of community and mixed interaction that you can get from a mixed use. I feel like we just have a bunch of boxes. 2% open space, which this is 22 acres. That would be less than a half acre of open space, although there is a pathway in the very back of the parking area. Then we have a flex lawn in the middle of the parking lot and a pet park in the middle of the parking lot. That's not really inviting. It seems like there's not a lot of shade. There's a lot of parking. I just wonder if they should have parallel parking on the main corridor in order to be able to maybe have more of a buffer or a bike lane or some open space for community to come together. It just feels very our usual stuff all on one lot, and it doesn't really provide the interaction that you can get out of mixed use. It doesn't have a sense of community. I'm not a designer, but the 22 acres was such an opportunity. I don't know even what to think, so I haven't had a chance to discuss it with Councilmember Summers where he is, nor with staffs, and so I'll leave it. So is this for introduction?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and then we have a drive-through on the corner. That's really nice, too.
Yeah, but that's allowed by zoning.
No?
I do believe it's in the zoning, so
That
they,
is correct, yes.
yeah,
They're
there's
entitled.
probably a coffee shop. Yeah,
So
no,
we're trying to make it
you're,
a community area, and let's put a drive-through.
no, I see where you're going with this,
It's not
and, I can't, I'll say this about this, when they first started this project, it was the typical, you plop down your typical apartments on this and then retail along the front
Yeah,
road.
yeah.
The fact that they integrated the commercial into the retail, this is really the first vertically integrated commercial to residential product that we've had in Southeast Mesa.
I like that.
It's not perfect,
I
but it
just think
does
a missed
show that this is
opportunity
possible. I mean,
To do a great development.
I think an improvement would have been, and I pushed them for it, they should have used their rooftop space for an entertainment venue. But there are a lot of challenges to that. This, compared to what the product has been in the past, what we've had in development is far exceeds the expectations of what's going on. And I think that this is, again, not perfect. I think what you're bringing up is legitimate. But this is a start for projects like East Market, or, Signal Butte and Williamsfield, and integrating that into the commercial development, where we can step up and use what's happened here and make improvements moving forward. This shows that you can do it. Because quite frankly, the number of developers that come forward and say, oh, you can't possibly integrate commercial underneath residential, it's impossible in the district, this proves that that is BS. Again, there are ways that I would have improved this myself, but this is a vast improvement, and hopefully a harbinger of what kind of development is to come. And Mary really did. Mary's not here. She ran away to Hawaii, in case anyone's wondering why poor Rachel is in the crossfire. I mean, she went to bat to really make some improvements to the original design. I think if I showed you the original design,
I would probably have a hard time.
you would need some Zofran to handle the nausea.
I appreciate there's been improvements. I still feel like it's very segmented. I like the mixed use, but I feel like if this was 3 pieces of property, the same outcome would have been. There's nothing pulling it all together, where you're pulling together business and retail and living in a community-oriented way and having community spaces and pathways. I feel like it's very siloed, even though they're missing the opportunity of having one property to pull all this together, and it's very siloed. We have to put the apartments there, we're gonna put the retail here, we're not gonna provide any incentive to even meander and have community spaces mixed in or pathways. In fact, you have to go to the parking lot to take your dog to the pet park.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it's just like, that's a community space, but you gotta make sure that you can dodge all the cars and walk through the parking spaces to get your pet through
The
the
one in
pet park.
between.
I guess
Yeah,
there is a
maybe-
little
and maybe
tiny
we can-
walkway there. But it's just a missed opportunity for all this to pull together into an exciting project and make an example. And I appreciate that it is mixed use, and that's what, one of the premises we had of approving Haas Crossing is this could be accomplished in District 6. It's an attempt, but I don't think it's there, so. And I'll
I don't
follow up with
disagree
more.
with you, and I just bringing Hawes Crossing as a whole into it, I think that the entire thing lacks a master development and how it integrates, and that was a lost opportunity. Looking forward into some other developments, I love this conversation because there are developments coming forward, not just in my district, but others, and particularly, I'm just gonna point to the east side, because downtown is starting to see this kind of development, and it's almost become commonplace, right? You don't even have to ask for it. But on the east side, we have to beg for it, and yet it was part of the vision that happened particularly in the Gateway Strategic Development Plan. So, and the integration, the pathways, the walkways, all that, also part of the plans that happened over there. And so seeing this kind of development, what's the next phase? How do we integrate it better, not just within itself, but to the community, and make it a viable commercial center so that it's a center of economic opportunity in the district. There are going to be some other projects that we should be putting their feet to the fire on how this works. So that's my general statement on that as far as this is concerned. If the developer wants to look at, I think she makes some good points, is there some ways that we could tweak the site plan to make it a little bit better while still moving it forward? So it's on for introduction, so we just unless there's a strong objection, we can leave it on for that and then have that same conversation on Monday.
Are you
But
gonna look at the
overall-
rendering of this Main Street and the bowling alley there? Like, if
Which
you could
page?
have a median and a greenway, maybe push the parking parallel and provide, I don't know, some sense of, I don't know, it just feels like a regular street. So sad.
So
I don't know.
push the parking
I'm not
Yeah.
a designer, well, I'll talk to staff, and I don't want to belabor this, we have a lot to get through today, so I'll just leave it at that, thanks.
I'd
Yeah,
just like to
okay.
pipe up and say I agree with Jen and Use and Councilmember Summers that it's better than, it's getting better. The proposals that we're receiving for the southeast and the east, my district as well, it's not quite there. There are more creative integrations that I think we can do, to Councilmember Duff's point. And I think that several of us believe that and think we need to continue to push to get us to that point where we're seeing true integration, true pedestrian-friendly environment, that also accommodates people driving there, because we all know people are going to drive there. But it seems still a little bit not going far enough and a true integration. So I would agree with Councilmember Duff, and I think we should continue to push for it. Like you said, Scott, the integration of the retail
Yeah.
on the bottom, I mean, you're absolutely right. That seems to be, if you ask for it, it's impossible in the east part of Mesa, but I would agree with you, it's not impossible.
Yeah,
So,
I would, I'm gonna bounce off Julie's point on her, the project she's concerned about. We gotta adequately park this. There's no buses, there's no light rail. My district drives cars, right? So this has to be adequately parked for that. The area across the street to the east that's Amazon, I believe.
This is the middle of an industrial
There's-
area.
there's
no-
industrial,
There's
yeah.
pedestrian maybe interaction on
Within,
the site,
yeah.
but not outside the site. You are now walking in cow pastures or big box Amazon warehouse. So it's.
That's correct. And so, but the important thing to me is how they integrated the residential and the retail and the office. It's a lot better. If this showed up at, say, the Eastmark site or the Signal Butte in Williamsfield Road site or some of the others, this wouldn't fit in that area, because those areas are far more integrated for the kind of the walking and the pedestrian integration we're talking about. I do agree that maybe the space between the buildings could rearrange the parking. Maybe if, as long as they're meeting their parking numbers, to make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly, because I think Councilmember Duff does have a point about that. That might make it look a little bit nicer, rather than just all parking. But we do have to make sure that the parking numbers.
Well, on the parking slide, it's 232 stalls less than what are required.
Yes.
So we're kind of really.
But it does look like there's too much parking on the map, but then it looks like we don't really have enough parking.
Yes, we already, the,
Okay, so we do have to be really, yeah, she's right.
They've
We have
pushed
to
it
be very careful
They
with
pushed
that.
it to the back so you can front load the retail, so you're getting that visibility off of Elliott, which is the main thoroughfare. So it's both integrated, you want the integration for the people who are gonna live there, but frankly, the only way you're gonna sell those retail spots is you gotta show visibility on Elliott Road, so.
And I think because of the commercial and how we arrange this, and again, I think that's a design improvement over the past, is we move that commercial kind of to the street, so you don't see this giant sea of parking.
You don't front
And
load the
then-
parking, yep.
Correct, you don't front load it, putting it in the back and allowing some of the commercial parking spaces up front is gonna be a huge visual improvement, but it is a bit shocking to the eye when you see this plan and go, wow, that's a lot of parking in the back. But when you consider what every strip mall has, just flip this around, and that's what our eyes seen up until this point.
what's going
I don't
around it
disagree
though,
with it.
Scott? I mean, it's going to be all industrial around this?
It's
I thought it-
already.
It's already
Already
industrial
around
around this, it's already zoned. It's already zoned for that. As a matter of fact, the Amazon building is already constructed. There is some retail behind it, right? Or, I'm sorry, residential behind it?
There's some pretty junky industrial
It's,
locations.
and Google isn't far, the Google is under construction
Yeah, to
west.
the, right.
Yeah, I know my direct, I'll get
As
it.
far as parking, I completely agree with you. People are going to drive to this, but I think we do need to, as Rachel alluded, that you're going to look at that at some point in, after 2024. Because I think our starting point is already too high. So yes, it looks like they've come down quite a bit, but meaning our required number of parking spaces is already, I think, starting too high, is overparked, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. So I just keep that in mind.
Well,
Just one.
it feels overparked, the numbers say it's underparked. I would love it if they went vertical. I mean, there's in your district, at Chrisman in the 60, they're parking underneath the building to make the parking. Once again, that shows that either vertical parking or subterranean parking is possible in East Mesa when every developer wants to tell you it's not. The numbers are starting to show that these kind of things are possible. But given what's around this, I think this is a massive improvement over what we've seen before. Would I support this, say in Eastmark or other locations? No. I think there are different circumstances there, and I support both of you in some of the statements, but it could always be better, and certainly in other locations it will be better, or it didn't get built.
Just one final comment is that it just feels like everything is parallel, perpendicular to each other. The pretty little boxes in a row. We could make that more interesting. And I'd like to see the connections, some pathways besides narrow sidewalks, beside parking spaces to navigate from one side to the other. Just some kind of way to make it interesting, a pathway, so that people feel like walking instead of behind the 10-car garages is the only place you can walk. That's your pathway. There's just a meandering and flowing between the spaces.
Yeah, I see
Right
your
now,
point.
if I was at one end of there, I would probably drive to the other, because there's nothing interesting or desirable or comfortable about walking from one place to the other.
Yeah.
So,
Please schedule a meeting with the developer and planning, and if you can help tweak it, make it better, I'm all in support.
Mayor and council, if I could just add one thing. This item 6A is a resolution, unlike the prior item, which is an ordinance, so there's no introduction on this one. So for Monday night, it's for final action. So you might want to consider continuance of this one, if that's your intent, to be able to give an opportunity to make modifications to it.
All right, but if we're gonna do that, could we reach out to this company today, so that they know when I don't know what their time frame is, and financing is what it is, so I don't want to kick it down the road too far.
Okay, so we're going to continue 6A. All right, until council decides to put it back on, if these conversations can happen between now and Monday, but I'm pessimistic that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm okay if we can put it back on Monday, based on what.
Council says, or we can pull it on Monday.
Well,
Which
we
is
could leave
better.
it for Monday for a continuance to another date specific if you want. We could just continue it to the next council meeting. And that way,
Okay,
if you want, because it's a resolution, we don't have to continue to date specific, but we could just leave it for we can put it on the consent for continuance to the next council meeting if that's what council
That'll be fine.
chooses.
That'd be fine.
okay, so just to be clear, are we continuing, or are we just alerting to the applicant to the fact that it might be continued if our questions aren't resolved?
Continue for 2 weeks, to the
Okay.
next council meeting.
Great.
May 20th.
And just before you leave, Rachel, I assume there's no EV parking in this project either?
Mayor, I'm not sure of that answer. I'd have to look that up for you.
Okay. Thanks.
We got 2 weeks to add it.
Mr. Freeman?
Rachel, before you leave on this, this is a great conversation we're having at our counters here, but I've had to push back on an infill development in my district because the parking, the congestion, fire lanes, everything, as I you know, I had to tell the developer there was just no support for it at that time. I think you know which one it is. As I look at this one, I've really been asking the developers, not only for EV, but for covered parking, to put solar panels and integrate solar into their projects. That's one of the things I've been advocating for. And I don't know if this project encompasses that, because, you know, if they can add solar, then that is one asset that we have in whether you're SRP or City of Mesa electric geographical areas. But, you know, just for me, from my public safety, I'm looking at between the two buildings. I agree with Councilmember Duff. I mean, it's a rectangular box with parking up here, the main living in the middle, retail on the south side. But if somebody double parked in a fire lane between the two buildings, emergency vehicle access is compromised at that point. Fire, you know, we've just recently had some fires, all municipalities, and safety and be able to get fire apparatus into their respective areas is important. You know, a pet park in the middle of the parking area, I go. The lawn, yeah, I mean, it's like, I agree. One thing I've been championing is more open space. I think that's what people want. They don't want to be congested into an area. I don't know how it's going to be made better, but then he talked about the retail on Elliott Road. I think, and just getting people in there to park and access that. There was one question I had. There's some parking was shaded, that's shaded on number 9. What does that mean? I'm not familiar with that color coding.
So we do require that some parking spaces be covered. And up in the north, all these spaces that you see, I think on the previous slide is better. If you kind of can see where there's some X's over these areas.
I do, I
all in
saw that.
front.
I didn't
This
know
is
it.
all covered parking up here.
Okay,
But we can talk to them as part of our conversations about what their plans are for the tops of these, if there's the potential for any sort of solar on those.
so that'd be a perfect place for solar integration and help with that. But again, did I hear the shaded areas then on number 9? What that parking?
The shaded. Councilmember Freeman, can you point, which shaded areas are you speaking to?
Like the ones that are shaded in orange.
Shaded in orange, some parking spaces just north of the retail
Oh, what's
along
the shade?
Elliott.
Peach.
Peach color,
Peach color?
do you have that?
I'm not sure what those are indicating on the
Okay.
peach color.
I didn't know if maybe those were the shared spaces.
I would have to look into that for you.
Okay, I'm just asking the question because it differentiates from the other parking.
Correct.
I thought to me, they looked like they were ones that could be used for if you're coming for the commercial purposes or if you're living there. Because they look like they're close to place, like even the pickleball, it looks like maybe they have some open for public parking.
Yeah, I'll have to check with the planner and see what the shaded indicates on that site plan.
All right, with that, thank you.
You know, it took 3 years to get Haas Crossing approved. I remember I couldn't even talk about it anymore because it just went on and on and on. And I was in planning and zoning, and then I came to council, and it was still going on. There was a lot of thought, a lot of deliberation, a lot of concern, a lot of aspiration about what we wanted as a community. For 3 years, we thought about it, and community came together. This is a long, long, long process. Finally, it's approved, and then we're kind of excited about it coming, and then I feel like this was planned in 3 hours. And I know there's been, but anyway, I think the community deserves a lot more thought and consideration for the entire process that it took in order to get this approved, that we should be very thoughtful and make it what everybody was going to be excited about, and why it finally got approval is because people were excited about what it could be. And it's a missed opportunity if we don't take our time on there. And I am concerned about shade also. Hopefully, one of these days, we'll have a shade ordinance of certain percentage that can be achieved in maybe some pathways and landscaping. But anyway, we'll talk more. Thanks.
Thank you, I agree. Council, other questions about Monday's agenda? Okay, thank you, Rachel. Next item on our agenda for this meeting, item 2A, is a presentation and discussion of the summary wrap-up of the fiscal year 2024-25 proposed budget. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Brian Ritchell with the Office of Management and Budget. And with me, I've got Christy Griffin, who is the Operations Coordinator in the Office of Management and Budget. I know it's every year, it feels like a long process, which kind of is.
Yeah, it is.
So I want to thank the departments for their hard work, because this process actually starts in October and November and goes through all the way until June, starting with the CIP process. So I'd like to thank their hard work for putting this budget together, and also council for sitting through all of the presentations that we did this last month. So with that, we will be going over the city manager's proposed budget and kind of wrapping it up. And so this will be the last budget presentation for fiscal year 23 or 24-25 budget wrap-up.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. In February, Council met to work on the strategic plan and formulate council priorities. And then in late March, Brian and I presented the proposed budget, which really kicked off the department presentations to Council. We've presented on the utility capital improvement program, and immediately following this presentation will be the non-utility CIP. And then finally, the tentative budget adoption is scheduled for May 20th, followed 2 weeks later with the final budget adoption on June 3rd. When we initially presented the proposed budget, we highlighted a few topics, the first being public safety. We presented an analysis of overtime and the growing trajectory of that. And then the police and fire medical departments had the opportunity as part of their budget presentation to discuss strategies they're implementing, to mitigate that trajectory. As part of the proposed budget, there is $12 million for police overtime. There's also 3 academies included, slated for 110 police recruits, 5 of which are new police officer positions. And then the rest will really be to fill existing and future vacancies due to attrition and retirement. For the Mesa Fire and Medical Department, the proposed budget includes 2 academies with 50 recruits, 12 of which are for new positions for Station 224, and 8 for the new 12-hour medical response unit.
Mr. Summers.
Sorry, I missed it. What's the acronym?
Which one?
Oversee NIBIN?
Oh,
The NIBIN.
NIBIN?
It's the NIBINs. It's the new tracking system that police uses, and they use that for for helping with ballistics. And I'm not sure if there's a representative from PD that could probably go into a little more detail of the NIBINs that they use.
Wasn't it the new crime staff too?
Yeah.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Management, and Council. So NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistics System that takes shell casings at scenes when they're recovered, and they compare those to shell casings that have already been collected. And then they can match those shell casings and match them to a firearm
With the
and
pen
hopefully
strike.
the actual person to fire that firearm.
Okay, so the civilian and vacant detective positions that oversee that, who's going to oversee that then?
So that'll be in our Special Operations Division. And currently there's 1 civilian position that's filled, and this will be filling a 2nd position to assist with that.
Okay, so we're going to,
So the sworn that is currently over it, they will be positioned somewhere else, and we'll take that position. And so we won't be losing any sworn positions, really. We're adding a civilian. So we're civilianizing that specific position.
Okay, so the program continues
Right.
with it, we're just changing
We're
how
just
that's.
Put
gonna
a
be managed.
non-sworn person in there.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I need to hear. And one more, if I may, on the Mesa Fire and Medical, they have some civilian positions that deal with behavioral health, how should I put it, behavioral health responders, and they're changing some organization there. I could be wrong on this. Are we eliminating some positions for behavioral health response in the field, or no?
No,
Did I
we
get
have,
bad
we have
information?
that contracted out with Solari.
So it's contracted out, and that's maintaining staffing?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Solari, we've added our own, are we at the 4 now? We have crews in Mesa that we've increased that contract for. So that's who does, when the call comes in to 911, then if there's a behavioral health need, then we deploy Solari to assist in that.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that's maintained, because
Oh,
we've
yeah.
seen this before, Chris, where the state particularly cut funding for social services,
No.
behavioral health
Right.
specifically.
No,
and then
all of that
we
is
ended up
funded by the
sending
city.
fire trucks.
We've essentially taken, what before was Solari was available, to your point, countywide, funded by the county. But when we would call them, they're coming from anywhere else in the county, right? So it could be a 45-minute response. The council, has it been a year ago, made the decision?
I think it's 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago, sorry.
Yeah.
Made the decision to use our ARPA dollars to essentially fund through, with Solari, crews that are for Mesa only.
Right.
So we've reduced that response time. And I think that contract will be coming up. We'll be coming to council to renew that again with additional ARPA dollars. But, so that is our primary response for behavioral health calls, is the Solari personnel.
We
Okay,
have-
I just want to make sure that that's
Oh, yeah.
properly funded, because it's, the fallback in the past has been that we would roll a fire truck, which is expensive and is not equipped for that kind of emergency.
No.
Or a police officer, and that's not the best response either.
Exactly. To your point, it's not only being funded by ARPA, but we've built into the forecast that when that contract, or when the funding concludes with ARPA, we've already built in the forecast that the general fund will then pick it up from there. So throughout the forecast, we've assumed the same level of service.
Okay.
Let me-
There was some concern that was being cut. Let me clarify that, and then I'll get with you specifically on what that.
Let me
was.
explain it in firefighter terminology. So we have our first responders, Solari, 4 teams here, and automatic aid with the Phoenix group. So we have potentially like 6
The
to 8
Phoenix group.
teams of Solari if we need them. So we have 4 dedicated teams for Mesa to respond for behavioral response.
Right. No, and
And then
that,
automatic aid if they need it, if they're overbooked.
Coming
or
in from-
Coming in from other, but that's a longer response time.
right.
But they're still available to us if they're not.
Yeah, I just heard lightly through a rumor that there was concern that was being cut. That clearly does
No,
not
it's not
seem
being
to be the
cut.
case.
I
I don't
think
think there would be
in
support on this
fire.
council for that. What's
In
that? Beth?
fire, there's 3 to 4 positions cut. It wasn't for the social services and making sure people are getting, so we didn't have so many responses to people on the medical side.
Yes.
But it wasn't on the mental
But there were,
health
any
side.
position that was cut, they were all vacant.
Vacant, yes.
So the cuts to social services, what's that about?
Mayor, Councilmember Summers, as part of Fire's exercise to identify some of their budget cuts that we had asked of all departments, they identified a couple of vacant or soon-to-be vacant fire life safety coordinator positions. They have several of those positions with, I believe, 1 vacancy and 1 that was about to become vacant because of a retirement. And so those are the positions that we've identified. As part of that, they're going to be reorganizing that unit and looking at different ways that they can kind of maximize the resources that that unit has.
As far as the emergency response on behavioral health, that's fully funded.
Correct.
Okay, but the social services for those fire life safety ones, if those have a direct impact on reducing call volumes for basically non-emergencies that become emergencies because they don't have the proper access to social services. I want to pay very close attention to the effectiveness of that.
Sure.
To make
And these,
sure-
again, these positions have been vacant for a while, so any impact of
Okay.
the service has already been in place,
Sorry,
so.
we don't need to send expensive resources out to something that has a better way to respond to it. Behavioral health being a great example. Thank you.
Another topic highlighted in the proposed budget was on infill and redevelopment. The proposed budget includes 2 positions to target areas for infill and redevelopment, as well as looking at incentives and any policy adjustments that may need to be made to attract additional infill and redevelopment citywide. And then in terms of workforce development, education workforce development staff and their efforts toward building a skilled and competent workforce include fostering collaboration between public and private organizations to create those pathways to employment, which includes hiring events, job search assistance, and the project underway is the Job Connect Mesa platform, which connects and matches businesses and workers. Also included is $5.4 million for the Mesa Climate Action Plan. This includes existing and new projects such as electrical vehicle charging, tree planting programs for neighborhoods, and LED lighting conversions at city sports fields. And then as part of the community services budget, contract increase with the Arizona Humane Society, ongoing funding for Alston House preservation, and continued discussions on the heat relief program, which includes a county grant with a city match, and then ongoing discussions on the feral cats response plan. The proposed budget for parks, recreation, and community facilities includes additional staffing for their adaptive program and special events, as well as an IGA with Mesa Public Schools for city aquatic facilities and pickleball programming and maintenance. And then as part of the Transportation Department's proposed budget is an increase in 4 new positions to review temporary traffic control permits. And finally, to continue the city's efforts in recruiting and retaining quality employees, the proposed budget includes up to a 3% step pay for all eligible employees, which will be effective the first full pay period of July. And then the city is doubling its contribution toward the deferred compensation plan from 0.5% to 1%. And this is for all eligible employees who are participating in the city's deferred compensation plan that are not covered by an MOU. And next, Brian will review the financial forecast.
So with all of that, what we presented here on this slide is kind of to show council the past 5-year history of just the governmental funds. And just to show you that in the last 5 years, the general governmental fund has been healthy, the reserve has been healthy, and over those 5 years, the net sources and uses, kind of what we concentrate on, and also the percentage, has been growing. So over the past 5 years, the city has been able to add just over $150 million in reserves. And so we went from 126.5 at the end of 2019 to 243 million in 23-24 is what we're projecting. So I just want to give you kind of the history of that. The past 5 years, the city has been doing, the fund balance has been healthy and has been growing. Unfortunately, in this last couple of years, there has been some legislation that will cause some significant revenue loss over the next 5 years. And 2 of them are highlighted here, $75 million over those 5 years for residential rental sales tax. And then also with the implementation of the flat tax, the city is estimating about a $40 million loss in revenues for the implementation. So just those two total is $150 million revenue loss over the next 5 years. And so with that incorporated, the next slide shows the 5-year forecast, and you see the highlighted area. That is the same as how we ended the previous 5 years. So for the projected 23-24, we're looking at a positive net sources and uses of 23.4 million with an end reserve balance of 243 and a percentage of 35.7. So we've been growing that over the last 5 years. Now showing the forecast with those revenue losses, we will be drawing down on that fund balance, and you'll see the negative net sources and uses. So in the next year or two, the fund balance is still healthy at 33.4 and 27.2, but it's those outer 3 years that we're still looking to plan for. And by the end of the 5th year, we'll be around 12.3%, but also still drawing down that fund balance of 24.1%.
So Mayor and Council, this really is the story of Mesa's finances right now. And actually, if you go back to the slide 8, in 1920, we begin with a beginning reserve of $90 million. Just enough.
2020.
Huh?
You said 1920.
And actual year, 1920. Oh,
Years.
did I say? Sorry.
2019.
I should say
2020.
that a little.
Yeah.
Fiscal year
No,
19/20.
I'm the only one who struggles with that. Go ahead.
1920.
Yeah. I remember 19.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Fiscal year
Sorry to interrupt.
1920. We begin with a reserve balance of $90 million. We were coming, things were okay. We were doing, it was, kind of bumping along pretty well. But obviously, we were hitting the pandemic about that time. But despite that, we have grown that reserve fund balance in 5 years from $90.5 million to a projected ending fund balance this year of over $243 million. We have more than doubled that amount, 2.5 times, right? So despite a lot of the turmoil and chaos that's taken place throughout the city and the country, we have been very diligent in performing financially in a way that our sources coming in have been in excess of our expenses, our uses. And as a result, we've been able to continue to add to build out that reserve. So you see that 243 million. So today where we stand, we kind of stand at a point where in the history of Mesa, I would put this financial point up against any other time in the city of Mesa as far as its financial strength. We stand on a point of a huge reserves that we've established and built up over the last 5 years. But we are facing significant headwinds, right? It's very different than the recession we had in 2008, 2009, 10, where it came at us quickly and it was impactful significantly overnight. But this today, assuming that's still not going to happen, in the next 5 years, what's happened is that because of the legislative actions, it is materially going to change us, not next year, not the following year, but over a cumulative period of time as it continues to compound on itself each year as we don't have those revenues, which we had anticipated, right? When we built these budgets for the last 5 years, we assumed we would have those revenues available. So we have to make changes and we can't, and here's my caution is that as tempting as it is and the demands we have in our community, and council, I would love to be able to present to you all of the requests that you didn't see, right? That would take another month. But the requests that we had to parse through with the departments and say, that sounds like a really good idea, but we can only do this much this year, right? And as a result, we've come up with a budget that again is positive, right? The sources coming in, the uses going out will be positive. But for next year's budget, for the first time in 3 or 4 years, we will we're projecting that the revenues coming in will not be sufficient to cover the proposed expenditures for that same time period. And as a result, it'll start a drawdown on the reserves. Now, the good news is we've built up $150 million of reserves over the last, but look where we're going to end. We're going to end where we began 5 years ago. And it's not, and so we have to be disciplined over the next 5 years to be very careful about what we're adding into this budget until we can kind of stabilize that difference, that net sources and uses, and try to get that back at least to zero. It'd be nice to, always be contributing something to your reserve, but even zero will be a heavy lift. And so every time, and I think that the temptation is, oh, that's not for 5 years. But if you wait that long, it's very difficult to turn this big ship around in 1 year. It's very painful. And my caution is every time we want to add a program, and I get it, I'm not saying we can't, but every time we do that over the next 2 or 3 years, the pressure will be something will have to give, right, in a significant way after that. So when we make those decisions, we just have to be very cautious. Now, we as a city, as a staff, we need to continue to look for opportunities to do things differently, to maybe there's, and the departments were great at this year. They came forward and said, listen, this is a program or an expense we have, we don't need to, we can forego that for now. And so we got some of that coming back. We're also still enjoying, revenues are doing okay, but they are definitely flattening out. We are seeing that we are not exceeding, in the past, every month was a new record, right? We're not seeing that anymore. It's falling flat in the sense of, which is good and bad. We're not seeing the growth, but it's good because flat means it still was one of our better years, but it's not growing. So we have to be careful. We can't grow expenses faster than we're growing revenues. So we just wanted to make this point is, man, we've been doing really well for the last 5 years. And we're at a point where we can sit and say, we have tremendous security of reserves for the city, but because of the loss of these anticipated revenues, what we anticipated when we built this budget, we're gonna have to make some adjustments. $115 million, that we, just from the legislative actions, nothing the city did, just, actions they did will reduce us by that, and the rest of it is, our own issues we have to work on. But we're 150 million positive at one end, and we're 150 million negative on the other end. So the caution is, we have to be very disciplined and careful as we go forward. If we're gonna add something, we probably need to reduce something, just to try to keep ourselves in balance, so.
Mayor. So if, I know our financial principle, we want to be at between 10 to 15% of a fund balance. What are you guys comfortable with? Like, what's your goal to keep it at?
We'd like to be in the 20s.
20s.
Because what happens is, that helps us with the rating agencies, but it's also it's a constancy they want to see. They're going to ask a lot of questions like, wait a minute, even though 35 is amazing, what's happening? Why is it going down so fast? In 5 years, you're going to be down to 12%. Even though 12% is good, what the problem is they're seeing is that negative 24, right? And they're seeing that and say, well, this is not sustainable. What are you going to do to change that? So that's why I wanted to kind of get off the percentages a little bit. That's important, but when, at the end of the day, there's this tide coming through here, and we have to watch that net sources and uses. That is, the ideal is to get that to zero.
So I know that there's, it's not always good to try to compare a city's budget to like a home budget, because I know there's a lot of differences there. But like a number one principle would just not to be to spend more than you make, right? So when you look at the chart, our uses, for the next 5 years is much higher than our sources, which I think probably mostly is because of that $115 million, right?
Yes.
That would be like the main thing.
Yep.
So I know this year you asked departments to come in maybe 2% lower, just to get them ready, but are we thinking we're gonna need to have more drastic cuts moving forward, or depending on what happens?
It's a great question, and that's why we said 2%. And I think based on this schedule, every year we're gonna have to look at that, right? But the problem is we're always faced with all these other pressures. to spend more money, right? You saw $12 million alone just in overtime. Adding new fire station, I mean, none of these are bad. I'm just not trying to be, it's just that even the best idea is gonna cost us money, but the question is it sustainable for the long term? Because what we don't wanna do is put a council in 2 or 3 years from now, they're gonna have to make if we don't do little things and we don't hold the line, in a couple years, it will be significant impacts to this. The city will have to make some critical decisions about service levels.
Well, I'll add to this too, is the other thing you do when you, just basic math, you don't spend more than you earn. But when things get tight, and they have, because the interest rates have gone up, the cost of borrowing money has gone up, a lot of things that are outside the city's control, outside of our control is, in running our households, one of the things you might do is upskill so that you can get that better job, make some more revenue, that type of thing. And one thing that I think we fall short on is our sales tax revenue. And when you look at us compared to other cities per capita, we are not drawing in a lot of sales tax revenue. This is why
I see where you're going with this.
You see where I'm going with this? Last year, when we did this budget, we said we're gonna do a study, and that's underway right now, on how we can improve our sales tax revenue so people don't spend their money in other communities. And that happens a lot in my district, because we are underrepresented in quality retail, dining and entertainment opportunities. So that project and I know the budgets are tight, but we need to make sure that project gets full support once this study comes in, and that we have actionable items moving forward, because increasing our sales tax revenue per capita, increasing the number of visitors that come to Mesa and stay in Mesa, adding hotel space, improvements to the convention center, whatever is capital we could do that helps our revenue in the future, I think is a good investment in Mesa, will help with our revenue. So we need to pay attention to that. That needs to be included in this budget and future budgets, and because it's the best way to make sure that we're maximizing the revenue coming in that isn't a tax burden on our own residents. So I would like to make sure that, I'm just gonna put that out, buzz in the ear.
So the next slide, on slide 11, is just a graphical representation of those last 3 slides. So the first 5 years is that the history of it is, you see those blue bars are the net sources and uses, so accumulating 152 million in gain over those 5 years. But then the next 5 blue bars are the net sources and uses loss of accumulation of $150 million. So I just want to kind of graphically show that for the last 5 years, and then coming up for the next 5 years of what that looked like for the ending fund balance, and also the net sources and uses.
Mayor, I have a question. Brian, on slide 9, it shows 115 million revenue loss, and now you're saying 150 million?
So there's 2 different things.
2 different.
This is just a subset of what's happening, right? We're only highlighting what specifically the impact of the rental tax and the flat tax are. There's other things that are impacting
Okay, there's other
that.
pressures
But
on
these are by far, obviously, of $150 million, 115 million is specifically related to these. If I were sitting here and saying the difference over the next 5 years was, 35 million? I wouldn't say anything. I mean, we can handle $35 million in 5 years. 150?
Well, yeah, you just jumped from 115 to 150.
Right.
That's a significant
We will.
jump.
So
by
without, if we
35.
didn't have this impact from the state legislature,
Right.
we'd be,
We wouldn't have the conversation.
we wouldn't be having the conversation.
Thank you. But the conversation is, we have $150 million that we're looking at in the next 5 years.
We are having that conversation, yes.
Okay.
I have a quick question. So as far as our rating, which affects our bond rates and such, when we give financials, do they look at just past performance, or do they also look at projections?
They look at it
Yes
all,
and
yes.
yes.
They look at
Oh,
projections
yeah,
as well?
absolutely.
Okay, because they're just,
And they're gonna ask about,
Right.
they're gonna know this rental taxes, because every city's been talking about it. They read the headlines, they read the papers, so.
Hey, Chris, a quick question on, sorry, so at the 150 million community loss, what are some of the major pieces that provide us opportunities to reduce that number? Because as I've been on council, you know, we see the ending fund balance go to 8-7% in 5 years, but we end up at 30% or 25%. So there's things happening within the market as well, each and every year, that allow us to maintain the growth in the 20s, I would say, right? And so is there, you know, Scott Summers was mentioning, you know, retail growth. Us, you know, looking at 2% as far as the city department cuts potential. But is there other opportunities for us to kind of solve some of these issues that the legislature, I think, is putting on cities across the state that will keep us in that range of a healthy kind of ending balance?
Great question. Thank you, Councilman Heredia. So the one thing to remember is that as we've seen these reductions or the impacts, I lost my train of thought, but ask your question one more time, because I lost my thought.
So I think that, you know, as we identify opportunities throughout the next 5 years, as we see, what are kind of some of the major pieces that kind of reduce that community loss?
So let's back up a little bit on the historical side. What contributed to a significance that 150 million? Okay. So one, yes, retail sales tax went up, was bumping up pretty well each year, better. The big contributor to this, and we have been fortunate, and it's, as council sitting here, it's your curse and your blessing, construction sales tax. The construction sales, that's fair. And so that's embedded in that number, right? So, because we are very reluctant to project construction sales tax at a very high level, because we don't think it is over a long period of time sustainable. Need it's been pretty nice for the last 3 years. Now, and the good news for us is, as council's seen us come to you, and we still need to come to you about our own capital projects that are overrunning, we've been able to take that unanticipated, unexpected growth in construction sales tax and use those dollars as kind of one-time fixes to plug the holes in for our shortfalls on our own capital programs. So that's associated with a lot of this, but obviously we didn't spend all of it, because it kept adding, even as we were fixing the overruns on our own capital projects, it was still, you know, we weren't spending it all, and it kept falling to the bottom. What I'm concerned about, and I guess going forward, we haven't done a lot of projections as far as continuous seeing that growth, although we do believe, good news, I mean, economic development is talking to big companies. I mean, we did the big deal with Zenergy the other day. You know, it's a massive building, and it's 700 good paying jobs, right? And there's more teed up like that. So we're hoping, I guess part of it is this, potentially could we grow out of this? I think retail sales is helpful, but it is that bucket is also pretty small, because it doesn't include food, you know, it doesn't include, you know, so and it has to be, you know, if we could get more big ticket retail items, that helps.
Like dealerships and
car dealerships, think about the big consumer, those are, you know, car dealer, I mean, when we do our heat map of sales tax, boom, 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 the car dealerships pop up, appliance, you know, those kind of areas. So investment, pushing forward with economic development and bringing good jobs and great opportunities for retail, I think is part of it. But, you know, it's just a matter of what happened with this impact from the state legislature so quickly and the turnaround, and it's hitting us so hard so quickly. I mean, you see, we're gonna get there, but it's just taking 5 years to make up for what that impact is. So eventually, hopefully, we grow out of it. I think what's gonna happen in the next 5 years is Mesa, and not just Mesa, every city, and, go talk to Phoenix. I mean, it's a $100 million impact for them. We just, the idea of trying to keep up with all the programs and growth is probably gonna not be, maintaining what we're doing fine. If we have to expect to grow and add more, that's where it's gonna be more difficult for us.
Yeah, no, I think we also, I was hearing a report on just the amount of growth that we still anticipate Maricopa County as a region coming in, right? When you have the chip manufacturers of Intel and TSMC just adding so much to the economy here that the amount of people is still projected to be, top 3 in the country as far as this region, right?
Yep.
And so, people need as we're moving suburbs, sprawling all throughout the county, Mesa also will have continue that gain.
Sure.
Next 5-10 years, probably.
Yeah. We
Right,
hope
so.
Yeah.
So I think that adds also to as we build it and people come in too, that's something that we have to monitor and just figuring out kind of how do we project that growth. I know it's tricky, right? So.
Councilmember, you've kind of unveiled our, strategy. We're very conservative, and you know that.
Sure.
We're not gonna give you a number that is on the aggressive number.
Yeah.
Right? We're gonna give you the conservative number. We hope we're wrong, but we're not wrong by a huge factor.
Sure.
We're understated, but we're not, this is still a trend that we're cautious about, but we are also being very, we're not, we loaded up with everything that we think is gonna happen, so.
I think the really true challenge here is because of legislative action, we have a growing economy, we have a growing population, we have a growing whatever, but that requires more police and fire and roads and services and everything. It is odd to be in a growth pattern and then have such significant cuts. Usually when you have cuts in your budget, it's due to lack of growth, lack of economic activity, and so it's going the same way, but we're dealing with this growth and trying to live on less. And it's just not economically, it doesn't make sense, and this legislative action is detrimental. We're not able to, flow, the ebb and flow of economies when we're cutting, when we're growing. So it's very frustrating.
Go ahead.
So the next slide is the utility 5-year forecast, similar to what we presented in the proposed budget. We're still looking at the net sources and uses, and it does get better as the 5 years go out. However, we're drawing down on the fund balance, and a significant portion of that is due to inflation, cost of chemicals, cost of commodities, water cost, and also a significant amount of the projects going in there too. We have a significant amount of water and wastewater and solid waste and things like that of projects that are built into here. So, but we will be coming back to you in the fall in the utility rates. And just a note, over on the left-hand side, this forecast keeps the rate assumptions that were presented last November the same. So as we come back in November, we can have that discussion of rate adjustments for the utilities.
And let's be clear, it means the increases that we've been showing. This is a little bit different story. While the reserves are going down below what we would is acceptable for us in those out years, but the net sources and uses isn't as dramatically different. So we really think this is more of a tweaking that we'll have to talk about. Again, as you know, the philosophy we've kind of endorsed is if you're gonna adjust on your utilities, do it in small increments. And so we may have to talk to council about, here's what we anticipated. We may want to tweak those just a little bit to give us that sustainability out throughout the years. But that reserve is concerning to us, but the difference of the net sources and uses, we think over a 5-year period and just continuing to run our programs more efficiently, but even small tweaks in the utilities will help us solve that problem eventually.
So on the next slide, just adopting the budget. It does include a contingency amount, and that is just for any unanticipated expenditures, similar to kind of what we had this year with the storm damage over at Falcon Field, and also any unexpected grants that we may get throughout the year. So and then adopting the budget timeline, just to give you a little, as Christy mentioned in the beginning, May 20th, we will be presenting the tentative budget for adoption at the council meeting. And then on June 3rd, for consideration will be the final budget, but then also the secondary property tax and the capital improvement program. And then ending it on June 7th with the secondary property tax for consideration of adoption. And with that, we'll have any other questions.
Thank you. My 2 cents, I think it's been interesting to see these one-time economic successes that we've experienced over the last 5 years with regard to construction sales tax, and that's put us in an enviable position. I, like Mr. Heredia, have been sitting there for years, seeing the projected budgets indicating that we're going to try to spend down our reserves, and the opposite has happened, and I don't think that's because of poor financial planning. That's because we've had extraordinary performance in the development of our economy. So that's great. The problem going forward, though, is that the limitations on us are structural, imposed on us by the legislature. So we can't, no amount of good economic activity is really going to compensate for that. So I think going forward, to be blunt about it, we need to, this is a political problem and it needs a political solution. And we're going to need to talk to people that are running for the legislature and say, are you an enemy of cities or not? Because we've had enemies of the cities running the legislature for the last few years. And this is the result. We need the ability to reinstate the residential sales tax. The flat tax, I think that ship has sailed. I don't see the state reversing course on that. But the residential sales tax, I mean, how many hundreds of units are we going to approve in new multifamily?
I mean, just what was on your agenda, right?
Yeah.
It was almost
And
400 or 500.
that's thousands of residents that are coming in that need services, and we don't have a way to fund those services. So
I agree so much on this. We have such pressure from within our own city, but especially from the legislature on housing, right? Getting the number of units, making it easier, adding units. But you take away the rental sales tax. We add thousands and thousands and thousands of units, but now we don't even have the sales tax to serve them, police and fire and, services. So you want us to increase our housing, but we're going to decrease your budget in order to take care of that housing. It's maddening, and I don't think it's really thought through. Something has to happen.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. That's my point. So I think in the upcoming elections, we need to ask legislative candidates, are you open to allowing cities to reinstate residential sales tax? And if they're not, then we got to look for different candidates. Because that's the trajectory of our finances right now. All right, thank you very much. Next agenda item 2B, is a presentation and discussion on non-utility capital improvement program projects and status lists of previous general obligation bond projects.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's me again, Brian Ritchell, but also beside me, I have Billy Schomer, who is the coordinator for the capital improvement project area of the Office of Management and Budget. And yes, this morning, what we'll be going over is the non-utility capital improvement program for the next 5 years, and kind of highlighting what's in the budget for next year, and also projects that are underway, projects that are completed, And in the back, behind the presentation, there is a list of projects we put in the 2018 bond projects, the 2020 bond projects for streets, and then also the 2022 public safety bonds. So just to give you a compilation of a list of the projects that are being done, which have been completed, in progress, and then what are future. So
I hear too often, not from members of council, sure, but others, about, we just feel like nothing gets done. We approve all this money and no projects get done. Well, we wanted to show you, we've been very busy. And so that kind of backup slide is just to show you, since all the 2018 projects, the 2020 projects, the 22, just kind of give a little bit of a status. So you can see that list of what we've been able to accomplish.
So with that, as presented before, kind of with the utility CIP, they have the same similar funding sources, local revenues, regional grants and awards, the general obligation bonds, and then also excise tax bonds that help fund the projects. Similar to the utilities, on the non-utilities, operations and maintenance, examples of ongoing expenses are staffing for a new fire station or library, landscape maintenance, but then also some one-time is furniture, fixture, and equipment, but then also vehicles for staff. And similar to the operating budget and also the utility capital is current challenges is cost overruns for delays in receiving construction materials, but then also increasing in cost of labor, cost of supplies, and higher than normal inflation on commodities, services, and contracts. But then also just keeping up with the growth of maintaining current infrastructure, those costs have gone up. So those are some challenges. And this next slide, what I wanted to show was the general obligation bonds. So the past couple of elections, I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what was authorized by the voters on the ballot, but then also what is allocated for the budget of those. So as you see for parks for the 2012 and 2018, all of it has been allocated and those projects are underway or completed. The library, as you'll see, it's been allocated and we'll be doing a groundbreaking here in the next, I think, month.
I'm sorry, Brian, does allocated mean those bonds have been issued?
So not necessarily. So thank you for the question, Mayor, Council. The allocated means that we've put the budget for it. So we will be probably issuing bonds we'll take instance for the library. What we usually do, what the city's philosophy has been, and Mike Kennington, the CFO, if I can correct me if I'm wrong, is what we usually try to do is we will start the project and spend down that project, but then what we'll do for 6 months, then what we'll do is we'll issue the bonds to reimburse ourselves, but then also to fund the rest of the project. So authorized means the voters have authorized us to start the project and authorize us to go out for debt if needed. The allocated is the budget portion of it. So for instance, the allocated for the 2018 library bond was the 19.8, and there's a few other things in there. So we've allocated that amount that we've been authorized to be able to issue as the budget for there.
Allocated would not be actually spent. It could mean that we have a contract.
We've committed to the expense.
To spending it, yeah.
Okay.
So before a project in our system we can start identifying, have a contract or a design team. We have to create a budget for it. So it's already been identified for design or for a contractor. It's still being spent, but it has been moved into a budget that's needed for that project.
Thank you.
But that's why I would go, it's probably more helpful to look at the slides in the back, because then it talks about projects and what's been completed as projects, and that's probably more helpful.
Mayor, just a quick question on bond. What are we paying for bonds now? What's the interest rate we're selling them at? Do we know that off the top of your head, Mr. Kennington?
I do not.
Sometimes people ask, well, what's our bond threshold there?
Good morning, Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, Council. It depends, the interest rate, depending on the maturity of that bond issuance. Our last issuance, the weighted average interest was about 3.6. And so it just depends on when we issue it and how long each.
But over the general nature, that's about the range.
Yeah.
And that three.
Yeah, 3.5.
3.5% is usually where we end up.
So we're issuing bonds today for some of our projects, and that rate is 3.6, 4.25?
Yeah, so last time we.
Last time we went.
Yeah, last time we went, which was in spring of last year.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, fall of last year.
But we'll be doing another.
Under 4%, we're saying that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And our next sale is.
Spring of next year of 25.
Yeah.
So we're doing an 18-month cycle right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question on the streets before we go to the next slide. So what are authorized versus allocated at, 23% of the usage? What has been the holdup on the streets, or why is that figure not fulfilled?
Yeah, I would have to get
Is Eric here?
either RJ or.
Eric, just kind of generally, I mean, we've had a lot of, what are some of the challenges in some of those street projects? Other than not having enough money?
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Councilmember Duff, I think, so we had the general election in 2020, and it's really taken us this amount of time with our engineering department to design the projects. We've seen a lot of delay from utility coordination. Unfortunately, the streets, the roadway network is not just for transportation, but there are utility corridors also. There's been a lot of delay there. We're going to see, you're going to see a large jump from 23% to between this year and next year. We have 4 to 5 projects going under construction over the next calendar year.
It's probably not fair to put it all on streets. It's all because when we go do a major street, we want to make sure the utilities are in place, they're not coming back. And that has been a big challenge on the utility side, not just because of our own utilities, but just coordinating with all the other utilities and making sure the engineering for the utilities is much more complex than it is for putting the street in. And so that's usually where we get delayed.
Okay, thank you.
On the street side, so Prop 400, so us expending that, you're mentioning increasing that 23%. So I'm assuming that there's some Prop 400 advantage that we are leveraging as well in addition to what we're spending, or is this all included with that?
So Mayor, Vice Mayor, the Prop 400 is reimbursement that will come back for us spending this $100 million.
Okay.
The $100 million, if we talk about the whole Streets Bond Mesa Moves program, there was $100 million worth of bonds, but we talked about leveraging $62 million more from reimbursements for additional projects or additional costs.
Are we running out of time for that reimbursement?
No.
Before it expires?
No.
Okay.
There'll be money even after the election.
Okay. All right.
Well, I'm just curious, with the governor's veto of Prop 400 a couple of years ago, I mean, it seems like we've been without a future transportation plan for a couple of years. And so are we just falling behind because we're not working, we don't have the certainty of being able to go forward on projects until 473 is determined?
No, I think we're moving,
Yeah, so Mayor, Prop 400 is funded all the way, or sales tax collection will happen all the way through December 31st of 2025. And we will have time after 2025 to expend those, revenue collections.
Just the revenue collection stop, the projects can continue.
I get that, but we're not working on projects post Prop 400 yet because we don't know that we're going to have any matching funds from the region. And so might that explain why we're maybe not building streets as fast?
All of the projects in the 2020 bond are in Prop 400. They're not part of Prop 479.
And Mayor, I think it's just a matter of, while Prop 400 is great, it creates a match, you still have to do the project and spend the money before you can get reimbursed. And it's just the effort it takes to get those projects done.
Okay.
And these are big, I mean, these are made, some of these are new streets. Some of these are, well, most of them are, I guess, they're reconstructs, Eric, or most of these are new?
all of the bond projects are are widening streets or new streets. Our reconstruct, we're using the reimbursement money to do, because in Prop 400, the only way we can get reimbursed is if we're widening a street or it's a new street.
So if we use the money from the bonds to do the work for an eligible Prop 400 project, then when they reimburse us, that reimbursement we can go use for other projects that wouldn't qualify under Prop 400, if that makes sense. So we'll fully fund something, a Prop 400 project with bond funds, take the reimbursement and go do a project that wouldn't otherwise be eligible. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, Council, it has been a very busy year for the city. Some of the projects completed in fiscal year 23-24 include the transit project of the Riverview Bus Stop Pullout and Shade Trees. This one was completed in October. It was a bus pullout purposely constructed using trees exclusively for shade in lieu of structural bus shelters, and it was also part of the turf reduction program. Transportation did complete several projects, including the Sossaman Road baseline intersection improvement that was the 2020 bond with the project spend of $2.4 million. Parks and Culture, the Red Mountain Park expansion is expected to be open in the summer of 2024. They are waiting on the turf at this point. Main and Dobson Ranch Library renovations were completed, the Express Library at Monterey Park, the Post, and then in general government, the Police Department Evidence Facility is expected to open in the summer of 2024. Current CIP projects are the Mesa Council Chambers, construction expected to be done in September. The City of Mesa's Wellness Center relocation is currently in demo, it's in construction. Northeast Public Safety Facility is in construction. The Idea Museum Phase 1 is expected to be done in October. Mesa Art Center Playhouse patio is in design, and the Gateway Library has a groundbreaking set for May 18th. Williamsfield Airport.
Sorry, go ahead, Julie.
I don't know why I can't think of what that Playhouse patio is. Can someone remind me what that is?
So behind the Playhouse, on the very far end, there is a patio out back where like the kids or the Playhouse people can go and take a break, have dinner, lunch. The East Valley Children's Theater goes there. We use that, and we serve the kids dinner on
Billy's not speaking
Saturdays.
from personal experience.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's probably not viewable because it's on the east side, Billy, right?
It's in that,
And it's
like,
kind of in the back
alleyway.
behind.
Yeah,
yes.
between the building and the parking garage.
Okay.
So
And-
most people won't see.
Well, I've performed at the Mesa Art Center, so I remember that area, because I've been back there too, but I just can't think exactly. Is there more than one patio? Was that like a flex? Sorry.
I just want
Have any of you performed at the Mesa? No, anyways, you get to go back there when you're backstage, but is there more than one patio? Or
There is.
Okay, because that's what I don't know why I need to look at a map or something.
You and Billy
Okay.
can figure it out because Billy spends time over there too.
Okay, and, because I just need a picture where it is, but, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't remember that really coming before us and discussing that. I don't get invited to.
I don't think you were invited to the
parties they don't
patio.
Tell me about, so. All right, but yeah, I like Julie, I don't know much about that.
I don't remember having that conversation.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, please
Okay.
continue.
In construction also is the Food to Energy Phase 1, the electrical vehicle infrastructure, Phases 1 and 2, Falcon Field, Midfield Crossover Taxiway, they have a picture there. That one's in construction. And then the last 3 are currently in design. The Countryside Dog Park, Mountain Vista Trail has an estimated start date of construction for May 13th. And then the Signal Butte Park Phase 2 is in design.
Can I ask, is that Mountain Vista Trail the one in my district, District 5?
That would be the one north of the.
Red Mountain,
Yeah, the new, what's it called?
yeah, Red Rock.
Red Rock.
Okay, that
Yeah.
is, that's what I thought. Okay,
Correct,
thank you.
Andrew, yeah.
All right, projects to begin construction in fiscal year 24-25. The police department headquarters will get started when the evidence facility is done. In design, we have the 3 fire stations, 223, 224, and then the 205 rebuild, Falcon Field Anzio ramp reconstruct, and then the Val Vista Drive US 60 to Pueblo. It's designed, construction is estimated to start in January of '25. Future projects, we have the Greenfield, several transportation projects, Greenfield, Baseline, and then we have the public safety training facility improvements, the Hibbert employee parking garage, it's been purchased, it's currently in design, and then the Mesa Arts Center Arroyo renovation, pictured here on the slide.
Sorry, when is the garage supposed to be?
I know it's under design. I don't know if anybody's here.
Start date is unclear at this time.
Yeah, it should be, I'll have to get back to you. Yeah. What's the number? What's the date? Do we have a date for the?
I mean, are we looking at months or
Improvement?
years?
We're in design right now, I don't have the construction.
We'll get to you. Yeah.
Okay, and then the,
It doesn't have an elevator, it doesn't have power, so we're having to
Yeah.
kind of go in and,
so since we were talking about the Arroyo feature, since I was at the Mesa Arts Center a lot over the weekend and last week, I was looking at it a lot. That's just pretty new as trying to figure out what we're doing. We don't have any kind of dates on that
well,
either.
no, I think Ilya, when he was here, was that last Thursday?
He said we're working on it, but I
No,
don't
he's,
remember him saying.
they have a design team. that's trying- Our challenge is we keep losing water.
Yeah, no,
We
I
gotta
know
figure out
why it
where-
hasn't been
what's-
running, but I just
Yeah.
didn't know if we had a projected date of when that could maybe be up and running
Well, I'll see if
again.
we can get Ilya to give us an update on that.
They might not know yet if they're still trying to.
We got to
just
figure out
how
something
to
that'll
fix
work,
it.
right? There's
Yes.
been a lot of attempts, so we just,
Yes. Okay.
yeah.
So we also wanted to highlight a couple of the projects that were ARPA-funded projects. So the permanent emergency shelter, but then also the restaurant and food business incubator here downtown, and then also the Mesa Business Builder at the studios. Those were the 3 projects that were funded through ARPA.
Studios should be, I think in a couple of weeks, we're having, it's really cool space. That'll be a lot of fun to open that one up.
And then wanted to just highlight life cycle projects. So vehicle replacements, we go through vehicle replacements a lot through the year. Also airport pavement preservation, our computer life cycle, and then also our fire self-contained breathing apparatus packs are part of the life cycle. And then also the LED replacements, and then any transportation replacement and life infrastructure, some of the streets. And then also one of the big life cycle projects is police replacement and upgrades of their tasers.
There's a major upgrade taking place on the tasers in the coming year, so that'll be a big lift for us.
So, and with that, we'll have any questions?
Thank you. Council, any additional questions? All right, thank you very much. That represents a lot of work. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, item 3, is to acknowledge receipt of various committee minutes. Thank you, Mr. Freeman and Ms. Spilsbury, for the motion and the second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you, that passed unanimously. Item 4 is current events and conferences attended. I know you've all been very busy. Who'd like to start? Julie, thanks for kicking it off.
Okay, last Thursday, I was able to give a tour of the downtown to our cute Mesa Sister Cities exchange students from Peru and New Zealand, and the kids that are going from Mesa to Peru and New Zealand in like a month also did that tour. So that was just fun to see them interact with each other, and I think most of them end up staying with each other, which is just really fun, lifelong friendships there. And then several of us, Councilmember Goforth and Freeman for sure, we're at the We Run Mesa at Longfellow. Nicole Leba does that in our city, and it's just such a great program, and so many police and fire are out there to support and make those connections with the kids that I love to see. Friday, I think almost all of us that were in town at least got to go read for Arbor Day at different schools. So I read at Franklin, at Brimhall, the Lorax, and helped spread our Trees Are Cool initiative and plant seeds, and that's a fun day. Do you want to talk about the Friday night activity?
With the Mesa Arts Center?
The Whitman Park.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Well, no, why don't you just cover it? You're right.
On Friday night, Councilmember Freeman and I were at Whitman Park for the National Endowment for the Arts in collaboration with the City of Mesa Arts Department and Mesa Public Schools. And I should have looked up the artist's name because I forgot what his name is, but Miguel.
Yeah.
Something, Miguel. Really incredible mural. It covers a huge, way bigger than I was expecting, and he used the students and community members around in the neighborhood to paint it. I really recommend driving over there and going to see that. It's really incredible and such a great community thing. And we had Mabel out there and lots of city staff and volunteers helping make that a really fun, windy night at the park on Friday night. And then on Monday, I was able to speak with Silver Valley Elementary students about education and different pathways to education. Enjoyed doing that, 6th grade students. And that night was the Mesa Arts Center 20th anniversary season announcement party. So they made their big announcements of their season and what's coming. There's some fun Broadway shows that are coming that I'm really excited about. Councilmember Freeman and I were both at that as well. And then Tuesday, I was able to go and participate in the Azura's literacy book distribution at Kerr Elementary. And all the kids get to pick out 3 books and take them home and keep them. And I love to see these efforts for literacy in our community. And yesterday, a lot of us were at the Maricopa County Shelter grand opening. And it was really, I'm not even an animal or a dog person, and I was impressed. It was absolutely amazing, huge, beautiful new facilities that were much better than what they were working out of. That's an understatement. Anyways, just neat to see the surrounding cities and the county come together to help with that. And there were 16,000 animals that came to the shelter last year. And like 11,000 adoptions. So anyways, just, they're doing a big grand opening this Saturday if you want to go out and check that out. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
I said everything.
You did say a lot of it.
Mayor, I'll
Yes,
jump
go
in.
ahead.
So I did get to read at Lehigh School. They called District 1 and asked for a reading down there. So I went down to Lehigh School as well as Arbor Day reading. That was a fun time. Yesterday, I was able to tour Able Steel Fabricators. And I didn't realize this, a steel fabricator, one of the largest in the state, that they do a phenomenal job. Local business, and been out there by our Mesa Public Safety Training Facility for quite some time. And I appreciate all their work. And District 1, we hosted Back to Rock Block at the Lockwood Street party. 350 to 400 neighbors showed up at Rock the Block in our District 1, and that's awesome to see all these neighborhoods come together and enjoy food, fun, and entertainment, and a car show, an awesome car show. So that was on Lockwood between Harris and Gilbert Road in D1. Well, that's been a busy couple of weeks for District 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share? Ms. Duff?
Yeah, last night I went to a couple of events. One was with the Mesa Police Department at the Post. It was a community engagement meeting, and it just went over the stats and the transparency and all the new measures. I'm very impressed by all the achievements. Our Mesa Police Department were there, and then we had the public interact with all the department community liaisons and continue the work engaging with the community in order to make new policies and procedures and the continual improvement. It was powerful, it was a good turnout, and I appreciate all their work at Mesa PD. And then afterwards, I stopped in at the Mixhibition. It was an event at the ASU Mix Center where students had their displays of a lot of the projects they're working on. The one, I saw a few of them. One is they installed some sensors on the rooftop of the building in order to measure like pollen and dust and temperature, humidity, and all these other things, and it also showing what's possible and projecting measuring where we are and projecting our future, not only in that, but they can do it for transportation and people movement, and being able to use AI and sensors to model what's going on in our city and what will go on. It's very cool.
So do you know that the work by those professors is what we're going to feed into the big screen in New City Hall?
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that, because
Yeah.
they said it is the art project.
Yeah.
So as a community
I'm very
member or
excited about
resident,
that,
you'll be
yeah.
able to go into the new City Hall
Yep.
and look at current status of all these things going on in our city.
Yep.
And is interesting even as art, let alone
Right.
also serving as a data source. So it was pretty cool. Very impressed. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I was at some of those events as well. Others, I was excited to go to a graduation party for the first cohort coming out of the Mix Center.
Oh.
So people were getting master's degrees in these advanced technology programs from that building already. So that was fun to see. Also on Earth Day, I was honored to go to Keller Elementary School, where they are doing a great job, have a beautiful garden, and we planted seeds and read books, and it was a great event. I just got back from a U.S. Conference of Mayors. I appreciated being invited by Los Angeles Mayor Bass to join her on a trip in D.C., where we met with the secretaries of HUD and HHS and congressional leaders on homelessness, asking for more vouchers and some other reforms to CDBG and other things that I think will help us better address homelessness. And I leave Monday to go back to Washington, D.C. as part of the GPEC. Is every 2 years takes a delegation, and I appreciate Mr. Brady coming with me, and we'll go to D.C. for, I think, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to lobby for addition, and it'll be part of the civic leaders, business leaders from the Valley, so that will, I think we'll get good things done on that visit as well. Anything else, Councilor, you'd like to share with us? Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future meetings look like?
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go back to our regular scheduled study session times on Monday at 5:15, and that'll be followed by a council meeting at 5:45. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That concludes our agenda for this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.